So when I think in terms of jam tactics, pausing, it's a key practice for me. And pause simply means stop, which allows me to take a step back largely from the content of the mind that would have taken over that conflict situation. And notice as soon as you just stop, disengage from the entanglement of the content of the mind, the attention naturally lands with the body. And this is what for me was a game changer in my practice. It's mindfulness of body.
Welcome to the Guest House. I'm Shawn Parell.
And I'm David Keplinger.
And this season, we are exploring a term that Emily Dickinson uses to describe the essence of practice. She called it our gem tactics.
She's talking about how our spiritual, artistic, and intellectual inquiries shape the way we meet each other and move through the world.
This season, our guests from various arenas of creative mastery are going to share with us how they have refined their gem tactics and thus their engagement with life.
Thank you all for being here.
For our listeners, this is Nolitha Tsengiwe, and she is a Dharma teacher and a board member at Dharmagiri Retreat Center in South Africa. That was founded by Kittisaro and Thanissara Weinberg. And Nolitha has practiced since 1997 as part of Ajahn Chah's lineage. In her first retreat with these beloved teachers, she discovered silence as a refuge, and she has never looked back. Nolitha completed the Community Dharma Leadership Program under Spirit Rock in 2014, and she's a graduate of IMS, Insight Meditation Society, teacher training of 2017 to 2021. She's a psychologist, and she's trained in Karuna, which is core process psychotherapy based on Buddhist principles, and also Somatic Experiencing. Nolitha has been a leadership development consultant and an executive coach for more than 20 years. She is a mother, and she teaches Biodanza, which is a dance originated by Rolando Toro. And she also serves as a mentor in international mindfulness certification programs, including the Mindfulness Meditation Teacher Certification Program that was created by Jack Cornfield and Tara Brock. And that is how I came to know you, Nolitha, as for 2 years you served as my mentor in that program. Incidentally, also a program that David is a graduate of. So it is a joy to welcome you into conversation with us today. Thank you for being here.
Shawn, David, it's a delight to be here with you and have this opportunity to hopefully together explore our love of this practice and maybe what's alive for us in our practice at this time.
I'm so glad you said that, the love of this practice, because your spirit is imbued with that in the brief chance that I've had to know your work and to meet you now, Nolitha. I feel that very much. We often talk about the practice as a tool, as a way to go out and to engage with the world, to do things. But we've also talked about practice as a gift. You're interested in the gift of practice as well, which is not so much a tool, but a way of being that is like a dance, a thing to be enjoyed unto itself. Could you talk a little bit more about the gift of practice?
I have been in the last few days filled with gratitude and appreciation of having access to these teachings of the Buddha. Just noticing how without this good fortune, given my own challenges in life and challenges that my loved ones are going through, challenges that the whole world is going through. I find it hard to understand how people who are not having access to these teachings and practices cope. Because I notice for myself in these type times, I don't only cope, I have moments of thriving because I have this opportunity as a teacher to practice through sharing these teachings. So my practice is not only just my daily formal solo practice. This opportunity of practicing in community is so precious. I learn all the time about this human experience and how we're living in times that without continuity in cultivation of these qualities of the human heart, it will be hard to thrive and live life fully.
Just to follow up with that, you said the challenges that brought you to where you are now. Was it that you were always aligned with mindfulness before you had the language for it? Or did you come to mindfulness like many of us did because of anxiety or because of an inability to feel that silence, which is now such an important part of who you are?
Yeah, I met with Dhamma through suffering. Mm, I was experiencing a devastating loss, and I didn't quite have the tools to cope with that grief. It was a loss of a child. I have a child who I lost through creep death. And I was brought up Catholic, and I wasn't a practicing Catholic at that time. So there was no religion for me to draw from. And I was already a practicing psychotherapist who thought I understood grief from my clients. That I realized, oh, Nolitha, you don't have a clue. And I couldn't find myself at that time going to see a psychotherapist, which I still had to do much, much later. I think there's a place for that in our lives, in meeting with suffering. So the story is that a colleague gave me a magazine that had an article on meditation. And before that, I hadn't known of meditation, of Buddhism, of a meditator. And an interesting thing, what happened for me was that from reading that article, I noticed a sense of calm. It's a good thing I noticed. I guess I was able to, because there was so much grief. It was interesting that I could notice a shift in state and experience that as calm. And then from that point, I just did my research to find out more about this meditation. And I think 6 months from that point, I went for my first retreat with Kittisaro and Thanissara, who then became my teachers for over 25 years. Mm. So, David, there's something about, it's interesting. You go back to discovering silence and finding refuge in that. Now that when I think about it, it was a rediscovery of silence, because one of the things as a child I enjoyed in a Catholic service, there is a background tone of silence that even as a child I noticed and enjoyed. That's interesting, because before now I hadn't really even made that connection.
It's so interesting that you say that, because I had a similar experience growing up in the Episcopal Church. And what I felt, my memory, the visceral memory, is the sensory experience of the palpable experience of silence and the concentration of prayer in the room, and the scent of the incense and the sound of the quiet. Like, these are all the things that I remember, actually, where when I think about it now, it was the sensory signals of sacred presence. And I couldn't have described the experience, and it was just, as we were saying, transmission, right? Like, familiarizing, feeling the friendship of silence. And then later in my life, seeking to return to remember the feeling of that, the friendship with silence. And I appreciated so much, Nolitha, how you described uh, thinking that thinking that you understood grief from your clients. Like, we have these abstract ideas of the teachings of life, right? Like, impermanence, nothing that we have will we get to keep. And yet then life lands in our experience more viscerally, and we have to find what are our tools. What can we come home to? Or even be just held by when we're not able to actually do our own work of coming home to. So I appreciate this so much, and it kind of brings me to, impermanence. It's this kind of long word. It has such a, like, kind of literal sense, and yet it's like, how do we actually, like, digest this word impermanence?
You know, Ajahn Chah, uh, whose teaching centered largely on impermanence, would use a simple expression that goes, not sure, just not sure. That nothing is, right? And this is how he would train his disciples, would put them in situations where they can experience change, uncertainty. There's one of the stories I enjoy. The first time he visited his early Western disciples in England, uh, they had gone into this big advertising of Ajahn Chah's coming to England. Here's this guru from Thailand. And then on the day of the presentation by Ajahn Chah, the student who was in that role of marketing goes to him and says, Lungpo, are you going to teach today? This is the big day. Ajahn Chah says, not sure, not sure. So he would go that far in just getting the students to recognize that change is with us all the time, right? So this holding on to anything, it can only just end up in suffering if we're holding on.
If I could take that, I absolutely love that story because I am a poet by trade. I teach poetry writing, and so the work that I do with my students is all about language, all about trying to grab things and describe them. But poetry goes to a place that's before language or somehow around language, and that when we're describing things, we're also letting go of them. And we're very, very just lightly touching down in this field of trying to capture the thing that the student is studying or looking at or wanting to talk about. And it goes back to what you said about the liturgy and the silence of the church. That somehow in the liturgy there is this holding on, and then in the silence that's allowed when you're in the midst of a good teacher, there is this letting go. There is this spaciousness that really does reach down into the eternal, the thing that we can't talk about, that's beyond names and forms. So poetry is a place that walks very carefully in that world of words and is always trying, at least the poets that I love, is always trying to allow for the cathedral of spaciousness so that the eternal is there befriended alongside the changing. And what Shawn and I like to do is ask our guests to bring in a poem, maybe to talk about what's on their minds or a favorite passage. Do you happen to have something to share with us, Nolitha?
I do. The title of the poem is It Felt Love by Hafiz. How did the rose ever open its heart and give to this world all its beauty? It felt the encouragement of light against its being. Otherwise, we all remain too frightened. We live in frightening times. I think for myself, without the light of Dhamma, the light of these teachings, I would be too frightened.
How did your experience as a dancer before you knew the Dharma, how did it speak to you as a participant in this dance of letting go and holding on, silence and words, impermanence and eternity? Was there anything that was there for you from the beginning?
Yes. And again, as I contemplate my response, I'm realizing, oh, I never thought of that and saw it that way, that actually dance, it's about being with the immediacy of life. It's in the moment. You can't be in your head and dance effectively. Wow, this is interesting because I never thought of it that way about, that it brings me to the immediacy. There's this aliveness, freshness, and intimacy with life that can only be possible when I am in the moment with myself, with you, with life. I notice even as I speak now, there is this feeling of recognizing the intimacy that is here, that's unfolding. between us.
There's like the connection that develops in practice between presence and the recognition, the studentship around impermanence. I like this word intimacy really because it is a recognition that deepens in intimacy over time. And this poem I love so much. It's such a gift. And also there's something so tender to it because it's the poet putting himself in the place to say, to be sort of astonished by the rose. How did the rose ever open its heart, right? Because, it's implicit in that is like life is so frightening. The prospect of impermanence is not just, that the flower will wilt. It is a most serious teaching. And so I feel that there's just so much grace in, and then how does joy shake out of all of this? How do we find the presence of the encouragement of light, feeling the encouragement of light against our being? Entering presence, the gift of life, and feeling how it's all of it, it's all of it. If we're just in the fear, we're in a contracted place. And if we're just in the joy, we're not in the reality of life. So how is presence the sort of kind of place where everything can happen?
Yes, presence, as I connect to presence in the moment, it is everything. Nothing is left out. Nothing left out. That is love. When nothing can be left out. And love can come with both, joy and sadness. Sadness doesn't take away from joy. It doesn't. When we contract from fear, the likelihood is that we are not fully here. We're lost in thought. And then fear just takes over and overwhelms us. And there's a lot of that in the world today. And yet, with presence, with awareness, fear is okay. It's part of nature. It can arise and cease. Because I'm here, I recognize what is happening. That in itself it's a refuge or capacity to be with anything, really. To have a refuge at these times that's reliable. For me, it's everything. If I can rest in awareness, I guess the first thing is to recognize awareness. We don't always recognize awareness, and yet it's actually the essence of mindfulness. Sometimes we think mindfulness is about, feeling peaceful, feeling calm. The real essence is recognition. of awareness.
I'm laughing only because I'm remembering a moment in our mentor group, and someone was sharing something that was a little, I would say, like a little spiritually bypassy. It was like, oh, kind of gotten over something. And you just said, the point of meditating is not to solve everything. It's not to make everything, all the problems go away. It's to be with. Is to be with the experience that's here. Is to find the freedom of awareness of what is.
The freedom, that's where you're going to find it. It's in recognizing awareness.
Hey friends, Shawn here with an invitation to join me next September 20th to the 26th, 2026 for a contemplative yoga and meditation retreat along the breathtaking coast of County Cork, Ireland. Our setting will be Ballymaloo House, which is a world-class cooking school and country manor, and every day we will find rhythms of deep practice and nourishment and rest and rejuvenation. I hope you will join me there. All the details are at shawnparell.com/Ireland.
I think about the rose in Hafez's poem and how the rose responds to the light, how the light is not summoned by the rose, but comes to the rose as a gift. And at the same time, that gift is readily available to the rose all the time, that it's everywhere. It suffuses everything. It's coming out of the rose in its own way, and it's also being received by the rose. And so that light is such a beautiful metaphor for the awareness that you're talking about. And for those moments where we can have a sacred pause to receive it, to drink it in. Because I know myself, like so many, I came to this practice because anxiety, because of a feeling of not enough, a feeling of having to fill up my cup with something that says I exist. And when I started to feel the nourishment of the pause, of that pause, of actually emptying the cup and allowing something to come in rather than pushing to deliver something out, it changed my life. And it's still it's still difficult for me, especially in dealing with conflict. And I know that you've spoken a lot about conflict in the workplace and conflict in family life. And for me, because there was a lot of conflict, uncomfortable conflict in my house growing up, I think one of the things I came here to work on is how do I engage with that and still feel safe? How do I bring the sacred pause into conflicting situations at work or in life? And could you talk about that? I know it's a difficult question. Is there a way to bring this pause into a moment of conflict?
It's possible if before the moment of conflict, we were pausing. Right?
I'm laughing because I know how often I fail.
You call it a sacred pause. Indeed, it is, because it offers us the sense of safety that nothing outside ourselves can. So when I think in terms of jam tactics, pausing, it's a key practice for me. And pause simply means stop, which allows me to take a step back, largely from the content of the mind that would have taken over that conflict situation. And notice as soon as you just stop, disengage from the entanglement of the content of the mind, the attention naturally lands with the body. And this is what for me was a game changer in my practice. It's mindfulness of body. Because as soon as the attention lands with the body, there's natural emotional regulation in that moment. The nervous system returns to a state of balance and equilibrium just by bringing this awareness. Jack Canfield talks about loving awareness. And my teacher Kittisaro talks about awareness that blesses. So there's just something about pausing, allowing naturally the attention to land with the body. The body can be nourished, the nervous system can be nourished from this loving awareness or awareness that blesses.
There's two things from the realm of psychology that come to mind for me and through your words, Nolitha. One is that very famous quote from Viktor Frankl, who's a Holocaust survivor, who spoke about the between the stimulus and the response, there's a space, and in that space is our power to choose our response, right? So therein lies our growth, our freedom. So I think when you say the awareness that blesses, what are we blessed with? We're blessed with growth, with freedom, with a heart that is not caught in reactivity all the time. And I was also thinking about a trauma therapist named Bonnie Badenoch, who speaks about speaking of the nervous system. She says there is no such thing as self-regulation. There is only co-regulation. So this powerful, like, wait a minute. When I take a breath and I'm, centering myself, aren't I self-regulating? Well, perhaps one way we could work with this offering from Bonnie Badenoch is that when we cultivate a friendship of practice, right, a personal practice, we also present in our practice is all of the teachers that have offered transmission to us, the fellow practitioners that we share in the field of, of our practice with, and whatever internal allies of consciousness, of awareness. The breath, it's like little breath, row me home, like this kind of friendship of even the witnessing part of me with this body working together to come home.
It's an interesting idea. I've never thought of no self-regulation. That's very interesting, and that is just co-regulation. Because as I listen to you, the befriending of experience is relational. The witness is witnessing an object. Again, I can see or sense relationality in that. Co-regulation in my mind is always with somebody else, which is something that's happening now between us, with this quality of presence and conversation. Co-regulation is happening as well. more and more ease comes to be through your presence with me in this way. Because there's also something about the quality of the present that we bring in relation to the other. But I can see how, loving awareness that blesses its relationality there.
May I ask you, Nolita, about your use of the rain practice? Because that is one way that we reach that state of regulation, whether it be co-regulation or self-regulation. It's something that has become such an important part of my own practice.
David, the power of that practice is it is a practice that condenses the key principles of mindfulness. So RAIN is an acronym. It stands for, R stands for recognition, A stands for allow, I stands for investigation, and N, my preference of N is non-attachment. Some people use nurturing for N. So this acronym condenses key principles in of mindfulness. The first person from what I know who used this acronym RAIN was Michelle McDonald, who's a teacher at IMS, and then was popularized this practice of RAIN by Tara Brach. And most people who have had exposure to this practice, they swear by it. Why? It carries the core principles of mindfulness. It is the teaching of the Buddha, condensed. It works. Yes, that's why it works. I want to emphasize that because I don't know that people are always aware that it condenses these teachings of the Buddha. Allow, which is a core teaching. When we allow, we're accepting, we're welcoming the present moment as it is. If what's coming up is fear or hate or joy, we allow that. We're not pushing away fear, grasping at joy. We allow this welcoming. So we can't allow without recognizing what's going on first. So recognizing what is happening is a core principle of mindfulness. So we start with just recognizing what's going on. We could just be asking that question. Oh, this is my experience in the present moment. I'm experiencing what? Fear or confusion. And then allow says, let that be present. Whatever it is. Even if it's hate, sometimes we can misunderstand that natural human experience of hate and push away at it. Anything we're pushing away at, it grows. So it's allowing that experience as nature. Anger, part of nature. Any emotion is. So we say recognize first, know what is happening. So you got to bring attention to the present moment to know what's happening. And then allow, investigate, it means take interest, explore. what's happening. What's the nature of this emotion in the body? How does anger feel like in the body? That's investigation. It works because you are bringing full attention to what is happening. That's the key in mindfulness. We're attending fully because most of the time we're not here. We in our heads thinking about the next thing. We're still rehashing a conversation we had before now. So already when we are bringing this loving awareness or awareness that blesses to what is happening by showing interest, by investigating, we will experience wholesome, skillful qualities that naturally arise, like spaciousness. Suddenly you kind of feel, oh, I can breathe, right? So this is important that you can breathe so that you're not taken over by your suffering or any unpleasant experience. The reason I like non-attachment to nurturing is that by allowing, we're already nurturing. That's how we talk about sometimes loving kindness, metta. Metta is allowing. So throughout this practice of allowing and bringing loving awareness or awareness that blesses to an experience, we are nurturing. So once then there's the spaciousness, there's an experience of non-attachment. You can see, yeah, this is not who I am. The anger is not me. Suddenly that's so obvious. Because that's where the freedom lies. It's in not being attached, not to anything. The Buddha is very clear on that teaching. Actually, the last words that are attributed to the Buddha as he dies, he says, don't cling to anything. That's why Buddhism is talked about as the practice of letting go, or mindfulness as a practice of letting go. That's where our freedom lies.
I love what you say about the importance of allowing in the rain practice. If the rain practice is the teaching of the Buddha condensed into this acronym, then that A is at the center of it. It's the heart of it. And the way that you describe it, I really feel that when you take allowing to its radical fulfillment, all the other parts fall into place. You don't have to think about the eightfold path because it all falls into place. And there's this sudden alignment that's possible.
I incorporate the rain practice in my psychotherapy work quite a lot, and I feel that it's a practice that really can serve not just someone who identifies as a Buddhist practitioner, but both for kind of regulation of the nervous system, but also for opening more and more deeply to the inquiry of, can I be with this? Can I be with life on its own terms? Which no human being is free of life's circumstances on their own terms, right? Like in the sense of we don't get to choose. Allowing is not I'm gonna cherry pick what I allow. And it's also not I'm just gonna give permission to any old thing. It's not permissiveness. And so I feel that it's a really powerful gem tactic, right? In the sense of, how do any of us work with what we are all subject to? How do any of us make room for, whether it's, loving presence or a felt sort of conceptualization of God or source energy, self energy, any of these words that we might have for how can we how can we allow ourselves to continue to practice our way out of a smaller, more contracted grip on life and into the mystery of which we're a part, the experience of trust, of love, that's the ocean, that's beyond any of the little waves that we're working with, that sometimes can feel very, very big and very, very difficult. I think this practice is so supportive for just being human, not necessarily, for the work of being a Buddhist practitioner. And I've seen people incorporate it in so many beautiful ways into spiritual practice.
Other ways of talking about allow is to accept even what is hard to accept. Ajahn Chah's main teaching is about this teaching of allow, when he says it's like this. And you're gonna fight, resist. What is? If you do, there's more suffering. If you allow, peace, freedom become available.
And even joy, as you're sharing with us today. Even joy. It's like the teaching of, like, we're subject to, suffering. We're also subject to joy.
Isn't that wonderful? That we can experience all of it. Being human is about experiencing all of it.
When I think about allow, I know that there are listeners who are saying, it's a beautiful teaching, but I'm a parent and I can't just allow my children to do what they want. We live in a world where we can't just allow everyone to do as they wish. But I think it's a common question that arises with that very, very difficult moment in allowing or accepting. And I wonder if you have any teaching on that matter.
I'm glad you're raising that question. It comes from a place of confusion, of not quite understanding what we mean by allow in this context. Allow in this context is about being with the immediacy of our experience as it is. If there's fear because this is what's going on with my child, can I recognize and allow myself to have that experience? Because in allowing, you're resourcing yourself to deal with that situation from a place of responsiveness rather than reactiveness.
What a wonderful response. That encapsulates it. Well, I wanted to say that what I love about what's happening in our conversation is that the teachings that we keep returning to are phrases that come down to one or two words, as it is, nothing is. In the ways that the teachings are more about the space that they allow by getting out of the way. The language sort of gets out of the way and something flies through that reaches the other when those teachings are really working, when they're being carried by grace. And I feel that today very, very much. His teachings are really hitting me today. So thank you.
I'm so glad I had this opportunity to unfold aspects of these teachings with people who also appreciate them. It's such a joy. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nolitha.
Thank you so much for joining. If these conversations resonate for you, we'd be so grateful if you'd like, subscribe, or leave a review wherever you listen. This work is freely offered, but paid subscriptions make it possible.
You can also check out our work at davidkeplingerpoetry.com and shawnparell.com. You'll find both links in the show notes. Until next time, take good care of yourselves and each other.